Now that the new hall at Scariff GA Centre here, where our studio is situated, is almost ready. It'll open the door literally to the possibility of a lot more events.
Indeed, and we're going to talk about one of them, aren't we?
We are, indeed. Paul Brennan, not your first time here in the studio, but you are very, very welcome.
Thank you very much.
Now, Paul, I suppose Kevin Dundon maybe thought he was the first in the first act in the new hall here, which is a fabulous facility. I know you've gone through it.
Yes.
But you're actually on a week before it.
We decided to trump him and to come in a week earlier, yes. With the Midnight Court.
Yes, yeah. And that's, I mean, in this area in particular, the Midnight Court should be very popular.
Well, this is Midnight Court country, really. I mean, we're right in the middle of it. Yeah. The Merriman Tavern down the way is so named after the author of the original poem, The Midnight Court, written over 200 years ago. And
what kind of a show is it?
Well, what's the best word to describe it? Bawdy. Probably the best word to describe it.
I can see those tickets flying out the door.
Well, I mean, when I say that, I mean it is regarded as a classic of early modern Irish poetry, and it is, part of our heritage. But it is also running a bit in that line. I mean, nothing that I think in this day and age will cause immense upset or anything like that. But it's fun. It's a lot of fun. It's a comic satirising, as it were, of the Aisling poem, such as it was written back in those in the 18th century. But it's a takeoff of that. It's not actually really an Aisling poem in itself.
And it would have pushed the boundaries in its time.
It certainly would, yeah. I mean, both in terms of what it was a bit daring to say, in terms of the interchange between males and females. It's very much a men versus women, women versus men story.
Paul, what was Merriman at? I mean, it's a debate that has gone on and it's been resurrected again.
I know.
Was he having a smile, a laugh, or was he engaging in a very serious question, the status of woman?
Yes, he
and
was.
How it had fallen from the Celtic days.
Yeah, a very serious issue taken quite lightly.
Absolutely.
You could say. But often a light touch is a way to deal with a serious issue. And the way in which relations were between men and women at the time must have been such as would provoke a man like Merriman to write what he wrote. I think he was at that. He was also having a go at on the literary side, at having a go at the Aisling poem in a way that's making a little bit of fun of it, I think, without too much harm done.
But wasn't he also, Jim and Paul, wasn't he also engaged in a serious question of how the status of woman in Irish society had taken a fierce walloping since the Celtic days, and that here we have now coming into what was the age of enlightenment, okay? And you're wondering how a guy from Fagel, could be tuned in to this mighty movement across Western Europe at the time and take up the cudgel on behalf of feminism.
Yes, indeed.
I'm saying, for me, Merriman was the first feminist since Grania Whale.
Yeah,
what do you think?
Therefore not the first, but certainly maybe the first man, actually. Yeah. And, there's no doubt about it. I mean, the women come out better in it. Spoiler alert, I know, but they actually do.
Yeah.
And so therefore, where his sympathies lay is pretty clear. So you're right. To the
but I suppose then it is a court, and the chief judge is a woman.
It's a goddess.
Tell me, you mentioned there a satire on an Aisling poem. For the benefit of our listeners, what is an Aisling poem?
Well, it's a certain formula. I mean, I don't know terribly well. I haven't studied it in any depth, but I gather that it involves a character, usually male, wandering in the countryside, then falling asleep, and then having this dream in which gods and goddesses as well as ordinary people can appear, and wakening back up out of that dream enlightened. I mean, that's a very rough description of it. And that roughly is the passage of the Midnight Court as well. But the things that go on in the dream are a lot more earthy, or as David Marcus, who did our version of it in translation, called it salty, was the word he used to describe certain parts of the text.
It was written originally as Gaeilge.
Yeah, that's right.
Merriman wrote it in Irish, but this, as you say, is a David Marcus translation.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, Merriman wrote it in early modern Irish, which, if you and I look at it, we can read it, we understand a good deal of it. Some of the words aren't used anymore. Some of them are obscure words. Sometimes, for poetical reasons, it's hard to make out. You couldn't really do it in the early modern Irish that it was originally written in. I think if you did want to do it as Gaeilge, I think you'd have to modernise the Irish in order to do it. But then David Marcus came along in 1953, of all years, the year I was born, actually.
Yes.
And he did this ribald version of it, which at the time, I can't imagine that the powers that be, and the clergy in particular, or the hierarchy, I should say, were terribly happy with what he wrote. But nevertheless, he was a devil, didn't care what he wrote, and just put it down the way he felt it should be.
Well, look at this guy. I mean, he really is an extraordinary figure appearing on the landscape.
This is the writer now.
Right, yeah.
All right.
But he's using the material perhaps to get rid of certain things. The question about his own origin still remains unanswered.
About Merriman's.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking that, are you tuned into that one, Jim?
I have read it. I have, like David and the Ashling, or Paul and the Ashling. I haven't done any great study on it, but just to read a little bit here and there.
I tease you now.
Oh, I don't like this.
Because Merriman was teasing quite a lot. If you look at the sexuality question in this, he's making, in a sense, he's making a case for a return to the early Celtic, woman status, which had undergone, historically had been, undergone a huge revolution, negative revolution, so that we reach the era, the 1790s, or that thereabout at the time of the writing of it. Here we have, he's positing for us a consideration of the great position woman had from a sexual point of view, and from the rights associated with that, from the Celtic era. Yeah. And how, in fact, it had. They consider, for example, I was making some points earlier when I was reading up about it. It's a call to give back to women their rightful place in society. Would you agree with that? Power and authority.
Yes, I think you're right, because we know from the Brennan laws, this body of laws which belong to that Celtic era you're talking about, that women did have rights which were since stripped away as a result of many changes in society. But the Brennan laws entitled women to divorce, it entitled them to certain property rights and so on and so forth. And
do you know, Paul?
Yeah.
No doubt at all about that. When you think about the position of women with regard to sexuality in the 5th century AD was, from a woman's point of view, superb. She could divorce, and all she needed to do was be dissatisfied with the sexual performance of the husband and to God, I mean, but that's a fact.
Yes.
That was the Celtic system that Paul is talking about, the actual...
A dissatisfaction that clearly persisted down through the centuries.
Impotence.
Yes.
And what was... an old man getting married to a young woman, that's explored in your Midnight Court,
Yes. Yeah.
So, I mean, give back to women their rightful place. In other words, put things into the hands of the women. And remarkably, that's exactly what has been happening in Britain politically in the last fortnight, 3 weeks. I mean, remarkable, echoing of some of the cries or calls for status. I tell you, Jim, now I tell you, would you like the old Celtic womanhood status?
I can see some of our male listeners choking in their cornflakes this morning. No, we're looking forward to tell us about the actual performance. Who's in it, Paul?
Well, it's a one-man play that we've come up with.
Yeah.
I gather, John, you yourself took part in this.
I can't remember.
I saw you on stage.
It must have been a spectre or a ghost that passed through. Right. But I've always been very interested in the theme.
Mm. So the way we're doing it, I mean, when you did it, John, I imagine there were at least 5 or 6 actors involved.
Yes.
And that would be typical. I know that Sean Tyrrell did a version, the musical version of it, and he had 5 or 6 performers as well as a band. But in our case, it's just, the story is being told by one single man. And the question arises, how can he get from one character to another, especially from male characters to female, and then back again, in a way that is going to be clear and not confusing, and that's going to be convincing. So we've had in our rehearsals to come up with a way of doing that. And I'm not going to tell you what it is, because that would be a spoiler. But I think it's one of the features of our show that we've come up with what I think is fairly ingenious way of moving from character to character. And you'll see yourselves when you see the show what I mean. But it has meant a lot of work, a lot of head scratching over how are we going to do this in a way that will convince, that will make the audience feel like there are 5 people on stage, even though there's only one.
Yeah.
And so we've been working at that, and so costume became the big thing then with this production, how we get from one character to the other. And we were very lucky to have a lady called Petra Brannock, who lives up in Kinvara, who has done a lot of design for companies up in Galway, like Decadent Theatre Company and so on. So she's very experienced costume designer, and she did a great job, fantastic job of work on that aspect, and it really helps us to present the show in a way that I think is clear and entertaining. So
what are we going to, we're in the audience now for this, what are we going to experience?
I suppose you're going to experience, in the first instance, something of the beauty of County Clare. The play starts in this, the piece starts in this very calm, beautiful setting. The setting is described by the central character, who is Merriman himself. But then suddenly there's a crack of thunder and flash of lightning, and we go into the Aisling part. We go into the dream, the vision, if you like, and that becomes quite surreal. And David Marcus's translation is not concerned at all with chronological things. So there are anachronisms, like references. At one point, weddings are mentioned, and he says, "What do we need with toppers and tails and limos?"
Yes,
because limousines didn't exist in the 18th century, but. It becomes so surreal that you can have anachronism without any problem, and so the fun of it, the surreal fun of it, if you like, spills out after that changeover into the court, when it becomes the court of this goddess presiding as the judge over whether men or women should have the rights of it in various respects you've already mentioned, and then the way in which the one side and the other present their case is highly comical and full of slagging and full of all sorts of mudslinging, which I think an audience will enjoy enormously. And then at the end of the play, he wakes up and returns to this. Just to spoil it again, it returns to the countryside in which he started, and I suppose that's what you can expect.
He's not. I mean, Merriman, for many people, he's not a fool by any means.
No.
The guy obviously has been in touch with the world outside of fecal. So we've tended over the years to consider it fecal being the bones of it all. But fecal only because of the actual usual Aisling opening of pleasant countryside, and it's a nice situation to be falling asleep and then being transported wherever it is. He had second thoughts when the court case was over, I think. But I mean, he was a man in touch with, in fact, the way literature was going in Europe at the time.
Right, yeah.
And I mean, he was a very progressive farmer. We know that much about him.
Yes, because he won prizes.
He did the RDS medals.
Yeah.
And I wonder where the RDS medals for performance of good growing flax. That's what he got the medals for.
Right.
So he was in touch with the progressive side of the.
Yeah, and that eventually comes through. When you reflect upon what he's talking about, you can see that he was a learned man, and he had something to say. I mean, I don't know if you remember, John, back to the 50s and 60s. When I was growing up as a kid, I remember reading in the newspaper statistics like that the Irish were the oldest marrying people in Europe. The average age for a man was 35 and for a woman was 28 or something like this. And it's like those problems that Merriman talks about were still there in the 50s.
Indeed.
And the early 60s.
And apropos that very, very thing, the marriage age for a woman in Celtic society would be about 14. And for
half what it was in the 50s.
Yeah. So, and that creates, of course, to its own problems.
Well, definitely, that creates issues.
Indeed.
If somebody is married at 14.
Yeah. And the boy at 16 and made marriages. I mean, it downplayed, in a sense, the significance of marriage in society, when you think about it.
Yes.
It wasn't. Made matches would suggest that love wouldn't have been the driving force, whatever else it was.
Right, yeah.
Do you know?
Or that love would come later.
Well, was that...
If you're lucky.
Well, she sold that idea by whoever was, organising the affair.
Yes, mind you, recently we were in Lisdoonvarna and we had a live show from Lisdoonvarna where at the matchmaking festival.
Right.
So it's still a reason for a festival anyway. However, many people still take it seriously or not.
Yeah, no, it's still there, but it really was there back in the early 60s, and I think what was happening was a lot of old, very often farmers or other such people, were just not marrying young, and that was what was pushing the average up. Was that a lot of folk were just not getting around to it for reasons to do with inheritance, maybe, or to do with various factors like that.
Would you consider that it gave rise, that genuinely, like, I mean, the team is in the midnight quarter, it gave rise to the principle. Not principle, but the reality of loveless marriages.
Yes,
and that comes through in the part of the midnight court that we didn't learn when we were going to the primary schools. You know?
Yes.
We got that. That's just an aside on that now for a minute. Anybody listening, I don't care what age they are, they'll be aware of the first 4 or 5 lines of on Courtevania, you know. Bacná meg siú le cúis naun, is an bán trotúr, is an drút go trám. En nac na cailse gyment leve gan varig gan bhuil is sanche an le. Gialamach rí nuair a cín lach gréine, an talav an tír is ír na spére, go tanjavach híving, sív na sléite, ag bagart a gín ardonim meg héle.
Sounds like an audition, Paul.
Huh?
It sounds like an audition.
So you're too late. The part's cast.
but isn't it a lovely little piece?
Lovely,
That piece was incorporated into our, I think it was the Intercert Irish poetry.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Right.
But it stopped there.
Oh, absolutely.
Decades later, we realised that it was, you know, there was a lot more to it than Gnáig Siúl.
Half a century ago, and John will remember this, we had the Merriman Summer School here in Scariff. And you know, I know it continued maybe in West Clare as well, and he had associations with, I think, Milltown or that area there. But, you know, wouldn't it be nice to think that, you know, we'd have a revival of interest in Merriman back here? I mean, it's, you know, who was it? Seamus Heaney came, didn't he? And
he did.
Officially opened
the Merriman,
the stone, which is beside Loch Rainey, on which some of those words are carved, John.
Yeah, mind you, that stone had a couple of incarnations.
Yeah.
And it had, you know.
Yes.
By the way, De Valera, when he was in Lincoln jail, imagine, he fell for it, you know, okay? Yeah. And he learned the bloomin' thing off by heart. In Gaelic, you know.
Yes.
And he recited it. We've noted this historically. He recited for the other Irish prisoners. And two days later, he had escaped from.
Yeah, they let him off. Maybe.
I wonder.
What I heard was that he learned it off in order to recite it to his wife.
Are you serious?
I read that somewhere.
Yeah.
But anyway, Paul, hopefully. this, I mean, it should go down very well.
Hopefully,
it
yeah.
hasn't been performed around here for quite some time.
No.
I can't remember when the last time. Maybe it was back in the 80s.
Yes,
But
yeah.
hopefully that people will come from the highways and byways of East Clare to celebrate one of their own.
Good, yes, hopefully, yeah. We'll certainly do our best to entertain them.
So now, what date again?
It's the 19th of November, Saturday, the 19th of November, here in the GA Hall.
Saturday, 19th?
8 o'clock.
8 o'clock.
Yeah.
Okay. Posters aren't up yet, are they?
Not yet, no, they're arriving today, I think,
Yeah,
and we'll have them out around the area shortly, and we'll be being in touch with people by social media and
So
stuff.
people can dream about it now.
And it's come on the night, Paul.
Yes, that's the way we have it. Then people just turn up on the night and we'll take their tenors off them gladly.
Yes.
A tenor, is that?
Yeah.
Oh, that's very
Well, it's just an hour-long
very
show,
accessible.
so,
Yeah.
so I think that's fair enough.
Yeah.
Yes. So, and I mean, they will get to have a look at the fabulous centre that has been created here,
Absolutely, yeah.
which will have Kevin Dundon the following week.
You should run guided tours, you might get another tenor.
Anyway, Paul, we wish you all the best. We will keep highlighting the show on our programmes between now and the 19th of November, and hopefully it will be a big hit, and hopefully maybe the start of a revival in interest in our own local Brian Merriman.
Great, good.
Okay.
Hopefully.
Paul Brennan, many thanks for joining us today. Great to have you, and continue success with your work.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul.